Since November 4th, 2020, the Tigray region located in the northern part of Ethiopia has been invaded by multiple forces.
The Ethiopian army, the Eritrean army,
the Amhara militia,
the Amhara Special Police Forces,
the Amhara vigilante group called FANO.
In addition, both Abiy Ahmed Ali and Isaias Afwerki used United Arab Emirates drones as well as airstrikes, artillery shells, and rockets to bombard the entire region and population of Tigray. Both the Ethiopian and Eritrean forces deliberately and systematically have looted and destroyed Tigray's infrastructure, such as the Tekeze hydropower,
factories,
livestock, universities,
hospitals,
clinics, schools,
businesses,
churches and mosques,
and private properties.
They are on a mission to wipe out the Tigray population and steal our rightful land by claiming it theirs, by erecting their own flags, erasing Tigrinya written messages and sounding names, and also altering Tigrayans' identification card into Amhara.
They invaded Tigray in harvest season and burned countless field crops as they looted livestock and blocked humanitarian aid in order to starve the population and use hunger as a weapon of war.
They are also using rape as a weapon of war by raping our innocent young girls and women to strip away their dignity, honor, and break their identity.
The extrajudicial killings and indiscriminate shooting spree of innocent civilians of Tigray never stopped since November 4th, 2020, under telecom blackouts. In fact, the Eritrean and Ethiopian forces are now killing even more civilians in broad daylight with impunity. As a result, we are losing our families, relatives, and friends every day, non-stop.
On Saturday, November 28, 2020, 3 Eritrean soldiers entered my childhood friend Yafet's grandma's house. At that moment, Yafet was sitting on the couch and playing with his nephew. After they entered, the 2 Eritrean soldiers began to search the house for gold and smartphones, while the other soldiers dragged Yafet out of his grandma's house. His grandma begged them to leave Yafet alone and that he was young, but they ignored her plea. The Eritrean soldiers then shot him right in the head outside of his house. When they left, they threatened the grandma not to leave the house.
On November 26, 2020, I found this lady severely wounded in the city of Aksum and very difficult to behold. She was a victim of the Aksum shelling and bombardment by the Eritrean and Ethiopian soldiers. Her lower jaw was gone, her right shoulder was slashed, a part of her mouth hanging down to her breast, and a piece of her left cheek was the only thing intact. Her entire clothes was soaked with blood. She barely walked. She was full of unimaginable pain and agony. She was as though on the verge of death. Words have escaped her mouth. The only sound she uttered is a crying voice for help, filled with a deep pain and suffering, coming from within her, saying,
My relatives from my father's side, Lisanawark Laaka, 78 years old, Gurmai Taklai, 35 years old, Barhana Waldai, 23 years old, and Binyam Lisanawark, 17 years old. 4 of them were shot dead outside of the house during the Aksum massacre on Saturday, November 28, 2020.
I saw him that morning going to church before his life was taken away from him. I want to pray were his last words. Then later that day, we opened our doors to people wailing and screaming, which can be heard throughout the neighborhood. There, I saw my best friend's body lying on the ground. I was in shock and couldn't scream. My neighbor Granchell's body was also lying on the ground across from him. Dead bodies were lying in every block of the neighborhood. There, I also saw a woman resting both her hands on her head and crying, "They killed my husband in his bed. They killed my husband in his bed. They killed my husband in his bed."
I took her to the Aksum Referral Hospital. No medics were to be found to treat her open wound. We found some runaway nurses who gave her an IV fluid and put a bandage on her. They knew she was in a critical condition, who needed a surgeon. But that was the least they could do, since all the medicines and medical equipment were looted, destroyed by both the Eritrean and Ethiopian soldiers. I've never seen a person's body and a face disfigured in such terrifying way. The pain and suffering the woman was going through made me cry. I felt her pain. When I found her, there was nothing I could do other than cleaning her open wounds. Eventually, she passed away because she lost so much blood. She was in a constant of immense pain and suffering.
That day, they all just gathered together to celebrate a newborn baby. Next, the Eritrean forces came to the house and knocked at the door. Then they took all the 4 men outside and then point-blank shot them with impunity. That was the day in which the Eritrean forces went house to house and killed many civilians, and among them were my relatives.
We tried to pick up the dead bodies, but the Eritreans began to shoot at us from a distance once again, and all of us ran to hide. Yafet's body, alongside the others, laid outside for 12 hours because everybody was terrified to leave their houses, fearing they would get shot too. Yafet's and Granchell's bodies were the only ones retrieved at midnight, while the rest of the dead bodies were left outside for 3 days.
This poor lady was displaced from West Tigray, seeking for a safe haven in Aksum. It was a tragic circumstance. She escaped what she feared in her own town, Humora, but she found it in Aksum. Little did she know, the entire region of Tigray was targeted to be bombarded and shelled in a complete destruction and chaos. She is just one of the many displaced civilians who was killed. Many civilians have been killed, have been raped, have lost their lives, and so much have been looted and destroyed. Enough is enough.
My 4 relatives' lives were taken short before they could truly be a grandpa and uncles to the newborn baby. They gathered together to celebrate something joyous. A day that was supposed to be filled with love and happiness turned into a day filled with absolute tragedy and horror. Their lives were taken with no remorse. The Eritrean forces, who shot my 4 innocent relatives in cold blood, need to be held accountable now.
Yafet was 24 years old. Yafet was athletic. He loved sports. He was kind and respectful. He had a bright future ahead of him, but the Eritreans took his life short. I seek justice for my childhood best friend, Yafet, and the others who were killed in the most barbaric way.
This is a glimpse of the Tigray genocide still being committed on the people of Tigray by the Ethiopian and Eritrean army, the Amhara militia, the Amhara vigilante group, Fano, and the Amhara Special Police Forces. All these forces have committed human rights abuses and have violated and broken every international humanitarian law and rule.
In fact, credible reports have corroborated these human rights abuses and massacre. Case in point, the Amnesty International report on the Aksum massacre, CNN report on the Mariam Dongoland massacre, the Telegraph report on the Temben massacre, Human Rights Watch, BBC, and the list goes on. All these credible reports have one thing in common. They all tell us the horror of Tigray civilians being brutally massacred by the Ethiopian and Eritrean forces, raped and starved by blocking humanitarian aid. U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken has also described the atrocities committed on the people of Tigray as ethnic cleansing.
In addition, all these human suffering and atrocities committed on the people of Tigray amount to war crimes and crimes against humanity.
UN Council, we have heard your gravely concerned statements regarding the crisis in Tigray. We have also been waiting patiently for the past 7 months as you held your closed doors meetings 5 times, hoping you would come up with a concrete solution regarding the genocidal war in Tigray. The more you remain aloof on this urgent matter, the more lives are lost. That includes babies, children, and pregnant women. The Tigray people are being killed in extrajudicial fashion, being shot in broad daylight with impunity.
Not only that, the Eritrean and Amhara forces are gang raping young girls and women of Tigray to the point of unconsciousness. As a result, these innocent girls and women are suffering psychological trauma. Some are pregnant, and others are facing all kinds of transmitted sexual diseases, including HIV/AIDS.
Furthermore, the war started 7 months ago during harvest season, but farmers were disrupted from harvesting. Their field crops were burned to ashes, and livestock was looted. And now, rain season is approaching in Tigray, which means Tigray farmers need to farm again. But how can they farm when the Eritrean and Amhara forces are still roaming in Tigray, committing all kinds of atrocities?
UN Council, USA, European Union, and all international community actors, we demand the following.
The verifiable withdrawal of the Eritrean army,
The Ethiopian Regional Army,
The Amhara militia,
The Amhara Vigilante Group FANO,
the Amhara Special Police Forces,
and unfettered and unimpeded access of humanitarian aid to the inaccessible region of Tigray.
Furthermore, we demand UN-led independent investigation that excludes the Ethiopian Human Rights Commission to investigate all the atrocities, war crimes, and crimes against humanity committed in Tigray and hold accountable all the perpetrators.
Finally, we urge all the goodwill human beings not to remain silent. Instead, we ask you to stand with Tigray.